Well, it's great to be here. One thing Bob didn't mention is I'm from New Iberia, Louisiana, a small town in South Louisiana. So you have Mississippians and this kid from Louisiana talking to you this morning. Have you heard of New Iberia? Raise your hand if you've heard of New Iberia. What do you know it for? Rice and Tabasco. That's right, Tabasco. So Tabasco is made in New Iberia on a little slip of land called Avery Island, where all the peppers are grown and milled and turned into Tabasco. So we've been doing that for over 100 years in New Iberia. I want to say we have a great relationship, Louisiana does, with Mississippi, but that wouldn't be true. So every year when the results come out, any kind of state rankings about education or crime, people in Louisiana say, "Thank God for Mississippi." So that's the only thing I'm going to say about Mississippi, and I'll just move on from here. I'm going to talk about making hope happen, but I'm going to talk about leading with hope specifically, so that you guys can walk away here today with 3 things that you can do as a leader in your community to spread hope to others. I'm going to talk about some data. So we've been researching hope for the last 20-something years. We have polled students on their hopefulness. I'll talk about that specifically. You can still use the Gallup student poll in your community throughout this month to find out how hopeful your students are. So we'll talk about that. I'll tell you a few stories about hopeful people like Caleb that you saw in this video. I'll mention some other hopeful people as well. But let's get started with this statue right here. This is Chuck when he was a little bit younger. He keeps this in his front yard. I don't know if you've ever been to his house, but it's right there in his front yard. It's just, no, this actually, I mentioned I'm from New Iberia, Louisiana, a small town in South Louisiana. We're 16 miles from the Gulf of Mexico. We're known for Tabasco, we're known for rice, we're known for oil field work. We're this weird little funky town, and we had this statue on our church alley, right near the Baptist church and the Catholic church. This is a statue of Hadrian. A statue of Hadrian. You might know Hadrian from the builder of walls. So Hadrian built walls. He was a Greek emperor. And it was one of 2 statues or iconic figures we had in town. This one was outside the local bank, Iberia Bank. And the other big thing we had in town was a grizzly bear in another bank. So growing up as a kid, I thought every time you went to a bank, you were greeted by a big statue or a grizzly bear. But then I went to Lafayette, Louisiana, and I figured out, oh, that's not true. So country come to town. But this statue was placed just feet, I mean, from me to Chuck, from the main thoroughfare in our town, St. Peter Street. Okay, and I was just there this past weekend and saw where the statue was placed. And it was vulnerable to being run over by cars, but it was also more vulnerable to being defaced by college students who would come home over the weekend. So just imagine if you were back in college and you had a statue doing this kind of thing. What might you put in its hand? What might you put over its neck? Think about it. Jack Daniel's bottles, beer cans, Lay's, togas, which I thought were so redundant. One time, I remember we came out of church and he had a bikini top on. So I thought that was original, at least original. And the bikini bottom was in his left hand right there. So this statue was defaced over and over and over again. Now, this statue was brought to New Iberia from New Orleans in 1961. An owner of Iberia Bank went to New Orleans, got a little tipsy, and bought a statue. Brought it back for $3,000, wanted to put it at his home like Chuck would, but his wife decided that it should be at the bank. So brought the statue to the bank, first put it inside. The bank got a little bit busier. They needed the room for another teller window, then put it outside where I said it was quite vulnerable to defacement and all kinds of things, traffic and pollution, you name it. Well, over time, this statue did lose a finger. So on that left hand, a finger was broken off. the local historian said, we really should take better care of this statue. We paid $3,000 for it. It's valuable. And it was 1961, so it's kind of old. So they brought in an insurance agent from Lafayette, and the guy said, I think this is really old. And the other guy said, yeah, we bought it in 1961. And he said, no, I think this is really old. So they brought in another insurance agent from New Orleans that deals with antiquities and said, well, in fact, I did a little research, and this statue is 2,000 years old. 2,000 years old, from the time of Hadrian himself. So here we were, defacing this statue, making fun of it, treating it like a drunk uncle, and just not really taking care of it. But then we realized it was 2,000 years old. So with a little bit of Cajunity, we built a glass case around it, because that would protect it from a car bouncing up over the curb, right? So there it was. It stood outside the bank for the longest time. And then, as much as we love Tabasco, it doesn't drive our economy. Oil does in South Louisiana. So the oil bust happened in 1988. And the bank decided it was time to sell Hadrian. Time to sell Hadrian. They took it to Christie's auction house in New York City. They put it up for auction. It was the year of Hadrian across the world, so it was a great time to sell something tied so closely to Hadrian. And they sold the statue for $1 million. All right, so what's the moral of this story? It's not take the most valuable thing in your town and sell it. That's not it. That might seem like it's it, okay? But that's not the moral of the story. The moral of the story is that the most beautiful ancient thing we had in our town was not valued by us for decades. Not valued by us for decades. And then when we realized it had some value, we kind of had to give it away, to make ends meet. But it wasn't valued by us for decades. Whoa, hello. The most beautiful ancient thing we have in our lives is hope. And we don't value it. We treat it, we mock it. We say, I hope it doesn't rain. Well, if that's your biggest hope in your life, you're in a lot of trouble, okay? We say, I hope this happens, I hope that happens. But really, we need to save our hope for the most important pursuits in our lives. What are the most important pursuits in our lives? So I'm going to refer to a Gallup question that we've asked of over 10,000 people, okay, around the world, time and time again, in different countries, in Africa, like where the Buffetts work, and all over the world. We ask people, what are your hopes and dreams? I want you to think about that. Take a mental snapshot of your answer. Come up with more than one. What are your hopes and dreams? Now, if you ask the citizens in your small community, what are your hopes and dreams? What might they answer? My guess is going to be very similar to what you're answering, and my guess is going to be very similar to what the world tells us. Those are the hopes and dreams of people around the world, plainly stated in 6 words. I want a good job, I want a happy family, and I want a great life. A good job, a happy family, and a great life. What do people mean by a good job? They want to be employed at the level that they desire to be employed, whether that's full-time or part-time. They would like a full-time or a part-time job to meet their needs. They would like health insurance to be part of that. Especially in developed countries, people mention health insurance as part of that. So employment at full-time or part-time, whatever's desired, with health insurance, but they want that to be an engaging job. So I work with folks at Gallup. You know about engagement. Engagement is the involvement in and enthusiasm that you have for work. So you want that job to be something that feeds your passion, like the people in the video. They weren't talking about their jobs, oh, I have to do this today. They talk about their jobs with enthusiasm and passion. Do we have people from that video in the room? Raise your hand. I thought so. Raise your hand. 2 people at least right here and elsewhere in the room. That was a great video. Matt and your partner there, thank you so much. That was a beautiful video. That's what people want from a good job. So to what extent are you providing good jobs to the people that live in your community? Number two, people want, their hopes and dreams are a happy family. They also say they want their family close to them. So part of living in rural America, which I find out every time I go back to South Louisiana, is that your family is close to you. Your family is part and parcel of your everyday life. When I visited South Louisiana just this past weekend, I went to my brother's place. He lives, my last name's Lopez, he lives on Lopez Road, where our people have been living for over 200 years. Lives at the same place that we've always lived. And he went to the docks in Delcombe, Louisiana, and Delcombe's known for shrimp. He bought a ton of shrimp, not a ton, but it felt like a ton when I was carrying the ice chest. He bought a bunch of shrimp, boiled them outside, turned the radio on, and we were outside for hours, eating and laughing and drinking and socializing. And then the relatives just kind of poured in from the neighboring houses. That togetherness, that closeness, is part of what people want when they say a happy family. And then finally, they want a great life. They want a great life. There are 5 pieces of well-being that come together to form a great life. One is this sense that you have a social connectedness with other people. So that is something that you can give to other people, is that sense of social connectedness. Number 2, financial security. Financial security. It's what we want more than financial wealth. So people don't necessarily move back to a community because they're seeking financial wealth. They move back because they're seeking financial security. They want to know where their limits are. They want to know what the prices are. They want to know what they can afford, and they want to live a life that is within their means. And that's what the kind of financial security is. Then we have physical well-being. Physical well-being. People want a life, a great life, that allows them to pursue their interests, to get out, to be healthy, and to thrive in terms of their physical health. So you need health care to make that happen. You need that kind of infrastructure built up so people can have a great life. And then the icing on the cake, and I forgot one of them, and I may or may not remember the 5th one, so don't hold me to it. But the one I want to mention that relates to the work that you're doing is community well-being. Community well-being. So the icing on the cake when it comes to a great life, you can have these other 4 types of well-being, but then if you want to go from a 7 to a 10 in terms of your overall great life score, you want community well-being. You want to be able to give back to a community, and you want to be able to take from that community the kind of love and support that you feel as though you deserve and others deserve as well. The first one I did remember. We renamed it, so it's always hard for me to remember. It was career well-being, and we renamed it purpose. Purpose. So purpose is something that Clifton talked about. It's something that Clifton talked about. It's something that's important to all of us. It's that meaning that we get from work. That meaning that we get from work. So career well-being or purpose, social well-being, financial security or well-being, physical well-being, and then community well-being. If you give the people that live in your community those 5 things, I promise you they're going to say they have a great life. So what are the hopes and dreams of the people around the world? What are the hopes and dreams of the American people? What are the hopes and dreams of the friends of yours that live in your town? It's a good job, a happy family, and a great life. Those are the things that people are striving for. Now let's talk a little bit about things that people aren't striving for, okay? Raise your hand if you've ever washed a rental car. Everybody? Okay, let's start over. Maybe you've never rented a car. Raise your hand if you've ever rented a car. Whoa, okay. Now, no hands. Let's try that again. Raise your hand if you've washed a rental car. One guy, and he's going to have a great story about it. I know it. But it's not going to top the story I got in Omaha one night. I was given a hope talk to a group of business leaders, and this guy said, well, I took the rental car to a wildlife safari, and there are these monkeys, and they were throwing stuff, and the stuff happened to be their stuff. And I thought I couldn't return the rental car with stuff on it. Does your story beat that one? Off-roading in a Jeep. Yeah, I'm sure your insurance company would love to know about that. Yeah, got a little muddy. Yeah, and then the monkeys descended. Why don't you wash a rental car? It's not yours. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. Now hear me. People are working towards these goals every day with passion and vigor. They are not working towards goals that they don't own. So if you're trying to lead some change in the community and you're getting some pushback, are the people in your community owning the goals that you've set up for them? Or are you asking them to wash rental cars? Are you asking them to work on goals that don't matter to them, that aren't related to having a good job, a happy family, and a great life? So often we struggle with initiatives taking off. And I ask about buy-in, and I ask about rental cars, and I ask about washing rental cars. And people go, oh my gosh, I'm asking our community to wash rental cars. Okay? We do that every day in business, and we do that especially every day in schools. We're asking kids to wash rental cars all day long, to work on goals that don't matter to them. We've got to change that. We've got to make sure that everything we do, whether we're a small community or a large community, we're asking people to work towards goals that relate to their good job, happy family, and great life. Now let's talk a little bit about hope mattering. In the agenda you have, my talk is introduced by hope matters, hope is a choice, hope can be learned, and hope is contagious. Hope matters. We've done over 100 studies to demonstrate that hope matters. And these are studies, most of them published in academic journals, so none of which you've read. All right? I'm going to detail each of the 100 studies right now. In the next 4 hours, I will go through each one. No, I'm going to summarize them by talking about meta-analyses or studies of studies. But first, I want to tell you about how hope matters in terms of foreign aid. And when I talk about foreign aid, just like when you were listening to the Buffetts, think about the community aid that you can give to people in your locale. I want you to Google at some point today, and it could be right now, an article by Nicholas Kristof. Nicholas Kristof, he's an opinion writer for the New York Times, Nicholas Kristof, and he wrote an article, "The Power of Hope is Real." The power of hope is real. Now, I'm a psychologist. He quoted a lot of economists, and rarely do psychologists and economists agree, but we agree on this point. The power of hope is real. Let me tell you a little bit about the studies, and then I want you to kind of bring the relevance of these studies back home with you, okay? What he was curious about is what the economists were curious about. Does foreign aid work? Does giving someone something in another country work? So right now, when you go home, between now and the end of the year, you're going to be sent a ton of brochures by institutions such as Heifer International. Have you ever heard of Heifer International? Okay. What do they give to folks? What are they encouraging you to give to folks? Cow, goat, chicken, duck, pig. Cow, goat, chicken, duck, pig. They are encouraging you to give enough money to their organization that they can deliver what they call an asset to someone in another country, the poorest of the poor in another country. Okay? So what economists wanted to know is if we deliver those assets, are we actually making people's lives better? Pretty simple question, right? Well, the assets were delivered in two different ways in these studies that Kristof reviewed. First, he looked at the delivery of the assets alone, which is what the program promises. So you get the cow, the goat, the chicken, the duck, the pig. Okay? So this is the half of the group. You're the poorest of the poor. You're getting an asset. You guys get an asset plus about an hour of training to take care of the animal. To take care of the animal during the harshest climate that you have, okay? To learn how to take care of it either during the hottest months or the coldest months. To breed the animal. To harvest whatever eggs or milk you get from the animal, if that's the case. You're taught ways to take care of the animal. So you're given the will to do this because you're poor and you're being given an asset, you're being given will, but do you have the ways? Well, you guys weren't given that hour training, okay? When the economists went back to these different groups who got the assets, who had saved money, who had the asset, who had bred the asset? These folks. These folks. What did you guys do with the asset? You ate it. You ate it. You're the poorest of the poor in the world, and you're given a cow, a goat, a chicken. You're going to eat it. It's going to make your life better for a short time. But what hope does, and that's what the economists called it. The economists said we gave them hope training. We taught them the ways to take care of the asset so that their futures would be better. We pointed them toward the future and we said, this is what your future could look like. You could save money, you could have more food, you could have better relations with your neighbors, you could breed the animal with your neighbor's animals. All these things could happen for you. Just follow these steps. Hope is about way power. Willpower, most people have. Way power, people struggle with, yet it's easily teachable. Okay? So think about the assistance and the aid that you provide to people around your communities. We have some people doing health trainings. We have some people doing child rearing trainings. We have people doing all kinds of wonderful things in communities. But think about how much how you're teaching versus, hey, get going, the oomph, the gumption. You know, we need the how to go along with the gumption. We definitely need the how. We learned that again and again from different studies. So I'll tell you briefly about the 50 studies we did in, let's see what slide I have there, in schools. All right? We've been looking at how hope relates to academic success in American and foreign schools for the last 20 years. Okay? One of the latest studies done, I'll talk about a few individual studies but summarize the results, which are summarized right here. Talk about the results that are summarized right here. Any lawyers in the room? I'm not going to make a lawyer joke. Okay, we've got one that admits to it too. Yeah, all right, we've got two lawyers. What ranked you, what got you into law school? What test did you have to take? The law school admission test, right? And then what ranked you after that point? How were you ranked as a student? Was it on grades and that kind of thing? And then you got internships and clerkships based on those grades. Okay. So that's what we figured out. This friend Kevin Rand did this study. And we said, you know, law school's pretty straightforward. You take a law school admission test to get in, and then you're ranked by your grades that you get during law school. What role would hope play in a lawyer's life? So we ran that study. Kevin did this study in particular, and he ran the data, and he found that hope was a better predictor of law school rankings than the law school admissions test. Hope was a better predictor of rankings than the law school admissions test. So hope accounted for more variance in the grades you make in law school than the law school admission test does. Now that speaks to the inadequacy of the LSAT, but it also speaks to the power of hope. Now what is hope? And we've had some great definitions of it already. Hope is the belief that the future will be better than the present, combined with the belief that you have some power to make it so. And we've been studying this, like I said, for 2 decades. It's the belief that the future will be better than the present, combined with the belief that you have some power to make it so. In that power to make it so, you have willpower and you have way power. You have the will to get things done and the energy you need to sustain your effort, and then you have the ways to get things done and to navigate around obstacles that get in front of you on your way from point A to point B. That's what hope is. We just did another study looking at the longitudinal benefits of hope in college. So you want all your kids in your community to get the training they need or to go to college so they can have that good job. So we were curious, to what extent does hope define success in college? And what we found was that hope was the only thing that defined success in college over a 4-year span. ACT, SAT, high school GPA, none of those predicted meaningful variance in college performance over 4 years. Hope was the only thing that mattered. Now during the first year, especially the first semester of college, what we found is that hope combined forces with that thing called engagement, that involvement in and enthusiasm for school. Those two things predicted whether students came back for their second semester. But hope was the only thing that predicted whether students came back year after year and graduated within 4 years. To sum this up, we looked at these 50 different studies and we said, what is hope worth when it comes to academic success? It's worth a letter grade. It's worth 12% of the variance in academic success. It's worth a letter grade. So you guys have high IQ and high hope. You guys have high IQ and low hope. You're going to do a letter grade better than those folks. Now let me not confound things because I just mentioned hope and IQ in the same sentence. There is zero relationship between hope and IQ. Hope is an equal opportunity asset. So the folks on this side of the track can have hope, and the folks on this side of the track can have hope. It's an equal opportunity asset. It's evenly distributed across zip codes. All right? It has very little to do with intelligence, nothing to do with intelligence, and almost nothing to do with income. All right? We've done about 25 different studies looking at hope and income. 24 of them suggested a zero correlation. One suggested a 0.1 correlation. So it has almost nothing to do with the income. So it's one of those few equal opportunity assets. Why is this valuable in school? Well, let me talk about the Gallup student poll for a minute. Because we're not talking enough about kids at this conference. We needed to talk a little bit more about kids. What we did 7 years ago is we developed something called the Gallup student poll, and we said we were going to measure the hope, the engagement, and the well-being of American students. Last year, in the month of October, we polled 850,000 students and got their results. I'm going to summarize some of those results here. They don't vary much by urban and rural districts. Okay, so these results will be kind of a reflection of how the students in your neighborhoods may be doing as well. But first I want to say that you have about 1 week left, about 10 days left, to have students in your community take the Gallup student poll. So if you have a friend who's a principal, if you're a principal, call them up and say, go to gallupstudentpoll.com, and register for the last administration of the Gallup student poll. It costs nothing. Nothing to take it or to get your results. We don't make you take it and then charge you for the results, okay? It costs nothing to take it and to get the results in November. So you still have a chance to measure the hope of your students. And this year we have some economic energy items that we're testing to get at the economic energy of your students grades 5 through 12. So grades 5 through 12 can take this poll. Any questions about that Gallup student poll real quickly, because I am recruiting you. I really think it's a no-brainer. If you can get a principal to sign up 100 kids to take it in a school grades 5 through 12, then you'll have a snapshot of what hope looks like in your local schools, okay? But what does it look like in America? I know I will graduate from high school. 81% of American students say they will graduate from high school. All right? The national graduation rate is actually a little bit lower than that, but 81% say they will graduate from high school. Now, that's a will item. I will do something. It's willpower. It's a sense of human agency, and to some extent confidence. Now, how do American kids do on measures of confidence? Well, have you ever heard of the PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment? It's put out by the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development out of Paris. Every other year, they measured the reading, math, and science scores of students around the country, students around the world, ninth graders around the world. And what they find is that America is kind of in the teens on reading, math, and science. Okay, 13th, 14th place, 15th out of 30 plus organized and developed countries. One year, they had a confidence measure on the PISA, all right? Guess what place we came out in confidence? our American students? Number one. Our students are number one in confidence, but we're in the teens in reading, math, and science, okay? Will and confidence and agency is not where our students lack, okay? They're lacking, which I'll show you in a second, in way power, in the ways to get things done. I know I will find a good job when I graduate. Well, that goal is some ways off. 58% said yes to that. I energetically pursue my goals. 42% said yes to that. That number gets lower and lower as you go from 5th grade to 12th grade. The amount of energy that students have for their personal goals decreases with each passing year of school. It's as if school is siphoning the energy and will out of students over time, okay? And we see that in our engagement data as well. The happiest kids in America are kindergartners. And then by 12th grade, they're just miserable, all right? And there's some correlation between going to school and getting more miserable, as my 5th grader would tell me. I think of many ways to get good grades. Look at this. I think of many ways to get good grades. Only 53% could give a yes to that, a strong yes. Look at the next one. I can find lots of ways around any problem. Is that 31%? 31% said yes to that. Our students struggle with the ways to get things done. People struggle with the ways to get things done. People in Africa who are getting a goat struggle with the ways to take care of the goat. People in your community that are getting a new blank struggle with the ways to take care of that new thing. We need to teach the ways, not just enhance the will. There's an adult in my life who cares about my future. You'd want to see that at 87% or higher in your community. I have at least one teacher that makes me excited about the future. You'd want to score higher than 59% for your kids, okay? 59% of American kids say yes to that item. Now think about that. When you're in high school, high schoolers say yes to this about 45% of the time. They might have 8 teachers in a given day, and they can't say yes to that, I have at least one teacher item, okay? I want you to think about having the Gallup Student Poll be part of your community assessment this year, next year. We're doing it for 3 more years free for sure. We think we can talk the CEO into doing it longer. I don't know. He may say at that point we're going to do it for a fee or something like that, but I think for 3 more years it'll be free. Wouldn't it be great to have 3 years of data on the hope of your students? So if you can't do it this year, maybe you could do it another year. Now let's talk about the people you work with and the people you work for and the people that work for you. To what extent does hope matter when it comes to workplace productivity and success? To what extent does hope matter when it comes to work? We did the 50 studies. We did another 50 studies looking at hope and workplace productivity. Hope is worth 1 day's worth of productivity per week. That's what we found. It's worth 14%, it accounts for 14% of the variance in all workplace productivity. We looked at burger chains. We looked at restaurants. We looked at, those would be the same thing, by the way. Almost. We looked at burger chains, we looked at factories, we looked at chemical plants, we looked at, you name the business, we got data from those businesses and found that hope was worth a day's worth of productivity in the workplace. We found that managers were more likely to meet their quarterly goals if they were hopeful than if they were less hopeful. We studied a large aeronautical engineering company and looked at just their engineers, and we found that the hopeful engineer is more likely to go to work than the less hopeful engineer, to the tune of 4 fewer missed work days per year, which accounted for millions of dollars of productivity savings for the hopeful engineers over the less hopeful engineers. So regardless of the industry you're in, a hopeful worker who is pursuing what? A good job, a happy family, and a great life. They're pursuing those goals and they're not washing a lot of rental cars, okay? A hopeful manager, a hopeful employee will do more in less time and they'll do it better. We find this again and again and again. All right? So hope matters. I've given you examples that have to do with foreign aid, and you'll read that Christoph article I recommended, and I think you'll be convinced. But if you're not convinced, think about the 50 studies that had to do with school. If you're not convinced about that, think about the 50 studies that have to do with the workplace. Hope matters. It's the belief that the future will be better than the present, combined with the belief that you have the power to make it so. It sounds fuzzy, but hope is more than that fuzzy feeling. It gets you moving, it gets you active, it makes you move towards the goals that matter most to you. Now, in my intro, Bob mentioned that I like to convince people that investing in the future pays off today. One thing I think we were all taught at some point in high school, we were taught about this whole notion of compound interest, right? So if we put our money away today, we'll have more of it when? In the future. All right? We put our money away today, and if the stock market doesn't tank, we'll do okay. All right? And even if it does tank a few times, we're going to ride it out, and in the future we'll have more money than we put in. Hope works a little differently. Hope requires you to invest psychologically in the future so that you can behave differently today. All right, we had a quick chat about some work you do in healthcare. So think about this. I had a friend of mine who went through a heart transplant at age 6. All right, she got a second heart at age 6. At age 13, Rose was walking up a hill in Lawrence, Kansas, and felt some tightness in her chest. Her heart was going through rejection. So at age 13, she had another heart transplant. At age 13, she was required to take loads of anti-rejection medication and other types of medication to keep her healthy and strong. Okay? I asked her when she was about 18, I said, Rose, how many times have you missed your medication? She said once in the 5 years since her last transplant. I said, how do you stay so focused? I mean, you got to take them twice a day. I know you wear a watch, but how do you stay so focused? She said, one day I want to be a linguist. I want to have a little house with a picket fence, and I want to have a family. And to have that tomorrow, I have to do this today. That's hope. That's hope. She's living right now in Portland, Oregon. She's a part-time baker and part-time nanny. She is going through some health stuff, which will be part of her life forever, but she still takes her medicine every day. Her belief that the future will be better than the present links her to her behavior today. So to what extent does your community have this exciting vision for what's next? This exciting vision for what's next for a family, an exciting vision for what's next for a student. The extent to which you get people excited about the future affects how they behave today. In fact, we did a study looking at leaders and engagement in the workplace. And I already defined engagement for you. It's involvement in and enthusiasm for work. And what we found is that if you said your leader makes you excited about the future, you're almost certainly going to be engaged in the workplace. In fact, 69% of people who said they have a leader that makes them excited about the future, 69% of them are engaged in the workplace. If you said no to that item, if you said my leader does not make me excited about the future, 1% of workers are engaged in the workplace. 1%. If you're leading your community right now in a small or big way, and you're making people excited about the future, they will be engaged. If you're not making them excited about the future, they won't be engaged. They won't volunteer, they won't commit, they won't donate, they won't do the things you need them to do. All right? Let's talk a little bit more about penguins. No, not really, but I like the slide and I like penguins. There's a caveat here, okay? Can animals be hopeful, yes or no? Animals other than humans, yes or no? No, good answer. All right? All right, and it's because hope lives right here. And I know you guys know animals, but I've got to tell you, I haven't met an animal with a huge frontal lobe yet, all right? And hope lives in the frontal lobe right above your left eyebrow, in the prefrontal cortex, right about here. And animals just don't have sophisticated frontal lobes. So as much as your animal seems hopeful and anticipates things, all right, They're learning certain behaviors. They're clocking things by the sun. They know the sound of your truck. All these different things affect how they behave, but they're not hopeful. So these penguins are not hopeful, but I'm going to use them as exemplars anyway, all right? So we'll come back to the penguins in a minute. I know you're stuck on the fact that you think your cat is hopeful, but let's move on, okay? All right. I want you to do another Gallup poll with me. We did this poll with 10,001 people, and we asked a pretty poignant question, and then we followed it up with another question. The first question is, who is the most influential leader in your life? So take a mental snapshot of that person. Who is the most influential leader in your life? Now, thinking about that person, what 3 things have they given you to make your life better? What 3 things have they given you to make your life better? Everybody have a picture of those 3 things? Because I will call on people now, I'm warning you. You have a picture? What are a couple of those things? Yep.
Hope, resources, and support.
Hope, resources, and support. Jim, what are a couple of those things?
I said love.
Love. Love, vision, hope. Tammy, anything come to mind?
Confidence.
Confidence. Okay. And support. Okay, over here, Bob.
Hope, vision, and strength.
Hope, vision, and strength. Right here in the blue shirt.
I would probably say unwavering support.
Unwavering support. These are coalescing pretty quickly, right? So we had 10,001 people complete that poll, and we had 30,000 plus answers, okay? And then what Gallup does, you then put people in a coding room, and you have to go through those 30,000 plus answers and narrow those down to as few words as possible, all right? So this involves a lot of Red Bull and Cheetos, okay? Because you're working on 30,000 plus answers, and you've got to narrow them down to 4 words. And here are the 4 words, and you guys nailed it out of the chute, okay? Followers need, so you're a follower looking at what your leader gave you. Followers need hope, stability, trust, and compassion. Hope, stability, trust, and compassion. I think we hedged a little bit on compassion. I think the word, Bob, was love. But we weren't sure if CEOs were ready to be loved by their employees. We actually did this study twice, and the first time a lot of people mentioned Jesus Christ as the most influential leader in their lives. So we did the study again because we didn't want CEOs to compare themselves to Jesus Christ. So you always have to think about your audience. But we did hedge a little bit. Love or compassion, you can interchange those. But we know what that one is. We know what hope is. We're talking about that right now. Stability and trust are kind of very similar. Stability is you're the same person today as you were yesterday. You're the same person to the guy down the hall as you are to the woman down the other hall. You're stable. You're steady. All right? Trust is kind of the emotional side of that. Trust is a neurochemical reaction to someone else. Okay? The neurochemical oxytocin is built between a mom and her baby, just like trust is built between a follower and a leader. So oxytocin is at work when we trust people. But there are 4 followers' needs. So you're a leader in your community, whether you like it or not. Our data suggests people are looking at you for these 4 things: hope, stability, trust, and compassion. To what extent are you meeting those needs? To what extent does every email and tweet signify that you're a woman of hope, stability, trust, and compassion, that you're that kind of leader? To what extent does every interaction suggest you're worthy of that influential leadership role? That's what I want you to think about. Now let's get to these penguins, because I'm about to make your life a little bit easier, okay? you do have the significant burden of being a hopeful leader, of being stable, trustworthy, and compassionate. But to some extent, the power of social networks can help you spread those things to your community. Here's what we found, and this is work done by Nicholas Christakis, great name, Nicholas Christakis. And Nicholas wrote a book called Connected. And in that book, he demonstrated that positive emotions move from one person to the next person, to the next person, to the next person before they fizzle out. So that's why I have 4 penguins here. Okay? You are the lead penguin. You are the lead penguin. And how you behave today will affect the hopefulness of the second penguin. How that penguin behaves because of being infected by your hope will affect the third character. And you don't even know the third character. You don't even know the third penguin. You don't know the third person. And then that person transmits hope to the fourth person before the power of hope fizzles out. Now, the same is true about hopelessness. You can transmit hopelessness to the third degree if you're not careful. So hopefulness and hopelessness are transmitted to the third degree by starting with your behavior and creating kind of this ripple of positive or negative effects on other people. So you have a tremendous responsibility. One thing we've decided to do at Gallup and in other clients I work with, we've decided to identify the most hopeful people in an organization and empower them to be that hopeful beacon. So we put out a call, I think it was about 2.5, 3 years ago, we put out a call for the most hopeful teacher in America. So we used the Gallup student poll to find the high hope districts in America. And we went to those high hope districts and we went to the superintendents and we said, who is your most hopeful teacher? I have to tell you, these superintendents, we talked to many of them by phone, many of the nominating superintendents, they said, it did not take me a second to figure out who that person was. I mean, think about it now. Who's the most hopeful person in your town? You might have 2 or 3 people kind of competing for that title, but it doesn't take you a long time to come up with the most hopeful person in your town. So we had these superintendents nominate the most hopeful teachers in America. We gave them awards for being such, and then we picked the most hopeful teacher in America. Here's another Google for you. Mary Hawkins Jones. Mary Hawkins Jones, most hopeful teacher in America. You will see a woman that can transform a school district all by herself. What if you identify the lead penguin in your community? What if you did that in your school? What if you did that in your downtown? What if you did that in your government? What if you did that out of the kids, the most hopeful kid in the community? What if you said, now it's your responsibility to spread hope to the third degree? So you've got this power of social networking on your side. Hope naturally flows to the third degree. You can make that happen. But what if you kind of, increase the chances that you have this hopeful person empowered to be that lead penguin? Okay, you didn't know you'd hear about lead penguins so much in one talk, but I think I'm done with penguins, okay? All right, we're going to talk about the 3 things, I already talked about that. We're going to talk about the 3 things that you need to do as a hopeful leader to make hope happen in your community. Number 1, you create and sustain excitement for the future. You can't do it without some exciting goals that you're going to make happen in the near future. Number 2, you knock down existing obstacles to goals, and you don't put up new ones. You don't put up new ones. And number 3, you re-goal when the situations demand. All of you had a 2015 plan. Okay? Guess what year it is? It's 2015. What if they weren't the right goals? What if you were just wrong just a little bit about the goals you should be pursuing? Now's the time in your 2020 plan to re-goal. You don't just push the goals to the 2020 plan. You decide, oh, I might come up with some new goals that are different. So reestablishing goals, re-goaling, is a vital process to hopeful leadership. Creating and sustaining excitement about the future. I'll talk about one rural community that's done that well, and maybe you've heard from them. I don't know. Have you heard from Greensburg, Kansas in the past? So have you attended their talks? And Greensburg, Kansas in 2007, as you know, was hit by an F5 tornado, and I think it was May 4th, 2007, leveled the town. We all followed the story. We saw Leonardo DiCaprio show up, all that good stuff. I called the city manager and his Steve Hewitt, and he had moved on. He's now the city manager down in Oklahoma, in a small town in Oklahoma. But I said, Steve, give me the backroom juice. Give me the story about how this greenest rural community in America idea came about. And he said, well, as you know, within hours, 15 hours of the tornado, the mayor went before the cameras. Lonnie McCullum was his name, and he was the one that said, we will rebuild. We will rebuild. So he gave hope to the citizens that were reeling, and he gave hope to the Kansans that were reeling, and he gave hope to rural America that was taking one on the chin. We will rebuild. We won't go down in the dust, okay? So then, a day or two later, Kathleen Sebelius, who was then governor, this was before Obamacare, okay, so don't conflate the two. She was then governor of Kansas. She went down and she had a closed-door session with the city manager, Steve Hewitt, and with the mayor, Lonnie McCullum, and a few other folks. And they had already said, we will rebuild. They're opening the door to go out to the cameras. And she turns back to them and says, and you're going to be the greenest rural city in America. That wasn't really discussed in the closed-door meeting. Some of it was thrown out. It's like, oh, we could go green, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this, we could do that. And she just pulled that out of the ether and said, you're going to be the greenest rural community in America. And then she walks up to the CNN camera and says, they will rebuild, and they will be the greenest rural community in America. And then, guess what? Lonnie McCullum was no longer mayor a few months after that. Mayor Bob Dixon took over, and it was his responsibility to now deliver on that pledge. Look how hope moved from Lonnie McCullum to Kathleen Sebelius to Bob Dixon to the people of Greensburg. All right? They created and sustained the excitement about a future, about a big goal, and got people moving. Got America moving again towards rural America and towards rebuilding that city. And they're doing some wonderful things to this day. So they're a wonderful example of creating that excitement. Now I'm going to show you, with Matt's help, I'm going to show you a video of a mayor who is living outside of Pittsburgh, but I would say he's in rural America. Once you see his town, you might agree. Braddock, Pennsylvania. This was Mayor John Fetterman. You may have heard of him. He's running for Senate in Pennsylvania. At the time of this video, he was mayor of Braddock, Pennsylvania. He'll talk a little bit about that town.
With the right perspective and the right ideas, you can take a community that a lot of people had unfortunately written off and begin the long process of revitalizing it. Braddock was once a community of over 20,000 residents and underwent a mass exodus of over 90% of its population. That's translated into the loss of 90% of our building stock, housing stock, and also businesses. Braddock currently now is Allegheny County's poorest community. Never expected to become mayor, but Braddock is the first place that I've ever considered home. I think what makes my case perhaps a little bit more unique than some others is that I was elected by those very disenfranchised young people, and ultimately I carry their banner because I won by the slimmest of margins by 1 vote. It's really kind of a balanced approach. We care for the community that we have, and then we also seek to reach out to other members of the the outside community to bring them in for additional energy, ideas, and insights. We've got a lot of great partners for the youth program. We have Key Service Corps, which is the Allegheny County's AmeriCorps program. We were able to open our playgrounds for the first time in many years back in 2006. Not to mention any number of service projects that occur here and around the community where they come out and fix up, whether it's the community garden and also helping staff the urban farm. It's really an opportunity for somebody who wants to be able to take a space, buy a house for $6,000 or $7,000 or $8,000, make it their own, and really be part of what I think is really an organic grassroots community building. Because of that approach, individuals coming in from outside the community are always very well received. You know, white, black, red, blue, no matter where you come from, everybody appreciates a good neighbor, and that's what it's about. It's bringing in people that can value and save the spaces that we've lost here in Braddock, what remains of the spaces we have.
John's one of my favorite mayors. Like I mentioned, he's running for Senate now. They had lost 90% of their housing stock. They had lost 90% of their business stock. They were a food desert. And they, as he mentioned, they had shut down the playgrounds. They had shut down the playgrounds. He helped reopen the playgrounds. He helped bring a subway to town, which is a big deal in a town that has no food sources whatsoever. So he brought a subway to town. He worked with Levi's. Levi's did a commercial shoot in Braddock and did one of their big campaigns set in Braddock. Levi's gave $1 million grant to Braddock to build a community center. So now they have a community center. This is what hopeful leadership does. They see these obstacles, food desert, no playgrounds, no community gardens, no aftercare for kids, and they knock down those obstacles one by one by one. That's what hopeful leadership does. And lastly, as I mentioned, you have to re-goal at times. You have to throw away the old goals and find the new ones that matter to you most. And they're going to be around helping people get good jobs, make happy families, and lead great lives. I want to share with you this quote. It's now almost, it's old. It's almost 50 years old, but it's poignant. Each time a man stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. That's the Hope Ripples quote. And making hope ripples is what I want you to do. Thank you so much.